All right. Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Real Play podcast. This is Ciera,
It's Ebony.
and today we have Tia. Tia is a sex therapist. Thank you, Tia, for coming. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm actually pretty excited because if
Too.
our listeners have been following us for the last year, you will know that we have never touched this topic in this way. Like we've talked about,
Oh, wow.
we've talked about being abstinent. Um, I think that's really it when it comes to sex, right?
Yeah, abstinence, pretty much.
Yeah,
But
I think
I'm
that's pretty much it.
excited for this topic, right?
Right. So, Tia, let's start out. Well, you tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so like I said, my name is Tia. I am a certified sex therapist. I do have a private practice in Hickory, North Carolina. I've been a sex therapist for a few years now, and it's just my thing. I love it. I'm nosy by nature, so I like to hear all kind of crazy stuff that comes across my couch, and I just get into it, and we get into it, and we vibe. And I get them fixed up.
Fixed up. Okay, so you have a private practice. So, congratulations on that. Like that's Black excellence.
Thank you.
Doing your thing out there. Got your private practice. Is it just you, or do you have other um people that work with you?
It's just me for now.
Okay.
I'm still growing. Oh, it's just me. Yeah.
Go ahead and plug your name just so everybody knows. I mean, if you're accepting clients, are you? I don't know if you're accepting clients.
Oh, absolutely. I
Okay.
am. My IG handle is T the Sex Therapist, no E in sex. You can reach me by my website though. It's bethechangehky.com. And if you are looking for services and you're in North Carolina, then that's where you could go to get linked up with getting set up.
And is
Yeah.
most of your services virtual now since we are in a pandemic, or do you also have an office?
I do have an office, so it's kind of like half and half. It really depends on personal preference.
Okay,
But I do see a lot of people all over the state. So, of course, then they would be teletherapy or virtual.
got it.
That is so cool. Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
So, um, say I am in a relationship with my boo, and I feel like we
Hmm.
haven't, like, we're not compatible sexually. And I find your number, I call you, right? Do I come in by
Hmm.
myself first? Does he go in by himself, and then we do a group session? Like, how? What does a sex therapist actually? You know what? Yeah, let's back it up. What exactly is a sex therapist?
So it's really not that much different than a regular therapist, like a regular mental health therapist. It's just we talk about people's sexuality, their sex lives, their views and ideas about sex. And if it's an issue, we kind of try to find the root of the problem and give interventions to how to fix it. So basically, when you think about your mental health, just think about that, but sex involved.
Is
Because
there a client
And
that you?
it's really just that simple. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask, is there a client that you won't take though? Like if someone calls into you and maybe I know like some therapists have different principles or different I'm using the word principles, but I'm thinking about like values, right? And they're like, okay, I
Hmm.
won't take this specific client because that doesn't align with my values. Is that something that you practice too, or you're like, I can take a multitude of clients?
So I basically see just about everybody unless they come to me for like sex offender, court mandated type things. And that's usually
Mhm.
kind of out of my scope.
Okay.
But everything else pretty much is a go to. Let's go for.
Okay. So back to my now that I know what a sex therapist is, if I feel that I'm having some issues in the bedroom, do I how do
Mhm.
how does the first session go? Is it both of us? Is it just me? Do you kind of figure out each person's issues and then talk together? How does it go?
Mhm. So it usually depends on what the issue is and what the preference is for that patient.
Hmm.
I say 8 times out of 10, I see them by themselves.
Okay.
And that other 2 times they may come in as a couple and we might sort it out that way. So again, it just depends on if it's a personal internal thing or is it kind of like a we're not vibing kind of thing that determines if it's individual or a couple.
At what
Okay.
so at what point do you see this couple, right? So let's say I just start dating someone last month, would you see me? Because do you think that's kind of early, or are you like, it doesn't really matter?
So I don't think it's early. No, I don't. And also, I think it would be a better idea if people would come in the beginning or when everything is going good, kind of like a
Mm,
maintenance versus this is a last ditch effort, which I kind of see usually the latter. Usually people are coming to me when it's like they're in crisis mode and about to break up.
mm-hmm.
So the earlier the better is really my preference or my advice to people, because you want to be able to do the work while everybody's in a good headspace to do the work, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot.
Usually when people are button heads, or it's like we're at the end and we're fighting, it's a little bit harder to kind of break those walls down so they can be open to change.
Okay.
And speaking of breaking those walls down, I did see that you had a Zoom. Was it was today? I can't remember. Was it Friday? You had a Zoom about toxic relationships. I
Friday.
can't remember what day of the week it was. I wanted to get on, but it was Central Time, and it was like another hour Eastern Time, and then I wasn't home, running up and down the streets. But you were talking about toxic relationships, and I believe that was the topic, um, and how that
Was.
and how that mixes with sex therapy. Can you go in a little bit about that? How that session was?
So basically with that particular session, we talked about what it is to be in a toxic relationship and what it might look like, and then how it might look on a sexual level. So that includes like being stingy with it, or withholding sex, or using sex as a weapon, those kind of
Mm,
things that can be a symptom of your relationship being toxic. Or even like just a regular couple relationship, not even with sex involved necessarily. It could be as far as somebody being overly clingy or protective, or just keep pushing buttons for no reason, just because, almost like pettiness.
mm-hmm.
So it's just little things that can just build to make it a very volatile situation. And that's kind of what I spoke on.
Okay.
Just those red flags.
Sometimes we ignore those red flags, but also we do. I have heard of
Absolutely.
women like, "Oh, he in the doghouse, he not getting none." I don't know if that even makes anything better.
Mhm.
So, um,
It usually
I
doesn't.
usually doesn't. Yeah, because he gonna be mad. You gonna
Can
be
you tell us
mad.
from your perspective what a toxic relationship is, or what you would consider toxic in a relationship?
So, if we're talking about just a standard relationship, I would like to, let's say somebody's super controlling, always trying to go through their phone, always accusing them of doing stuff. Or on the flip side of that, somebody who was being very sneaky or very manipulative in the relationship and just trying to hold that power over them.
Mm,
Like an unwanted power exchange is what I would consider to be a toxic relationship, or
mm,
even just leading somebody on is considered a toxic relationship. Giving those false hopes, knowing that they're not going to fulfill those things on
mm.
purpose for the sake of maintaining whatever they got going on.
Interesting.
Okay, that I think that's definitely a good definition.
Yeah.
We all been in a toxic one here or there. As
Hmm.
you were talking,
Absolutely.
I you were talking and I thought about a good question and then it just completely just jumped out of my head. Go ahead, Ebony. I'm trying to think. Oh
I
my gosh.
do have I guess I can ask this. Um so I asked you like when couples can come into therapy, you said initially, right? Is there at some point
Hmm.
that you tell them like, hey, this is not gonna work, like, or you just
Mm,
try to work on it with them through the process?
So my job is not to tell them that it's not going to work.
True.
But if it comes up, it's my job to say, sometimes the best thing to do is to separate. And sometimes it does come to that. But that's not I don't just jump and say, listen, y'all need to stop this, because
yeah.
yeah. I'm trying to get you to get to a place where y'all both can see it without me having to throw
Mm,
those things out there. And a lot of times a lot of times I don't have to be the one to have that conversation. Usually somebody brings it up if it's a couple, and then we talk about it collectively. Okay, now what would that look like if y'all were to split, and go from there?
I just thought about my question.
It does happen.
So with the pandemic, and a lot of people have been stuck in the house with their significant other. We know that that's caused some strain on certain relationships. Some have gotten better, some have gotten worse. Have you noticed your number of patients increasing since the pandemic started? Or have you noticed any changes at all? It has?
It have increased, yes.
Wow. And
People
what
spend time together. They don't know what to do with each other.
They don't know what to do with each other sexually or
Yes.
on a regular day-to-day basis. So
even just regular day-to-day basis.
Can I add to that? So when you're talking to these clients, was the sex like better before the pandemic and just got worse after it, or was it something that they noticed before the pandemic and just didn't have time to kind of like worry about it, and then said, okay, I'm spending a lot of time on me, and if I got to have sex every day, let me just we got to talk to somebody.
So usually sex isn't the root of the people that I've been seeing. Like when you think about this pandemic rise and people come to see me, it's not really the sex. It is they're put together so much that they're up under each other. And so in a backwards way, their needs getting met, let's say that's mentally, emotionally, and then that triggers into the bedroom.
Okay. Okay. And
so it might look like sex is a problem, but really when we dig down in there, it's that you're home 24/7 and you can't get time to yourself to just go for a walk or be by yourself.
Right. What is the average age and what's the average demographics of your patients?
So I will say that since the pandemic, my demographic has shifted. It was, I would say, late 40s and up. Now I'm seeing like late 20s to early 40s. So it shifted significantly, actually.
That's very interesting.
I have a small question, and this is because we sometimes talk about church and as it relates to sex. So because of church, and a lot of people are saying like don't have sex before marriage, does anybody come see you prior to that? Like let's say they're about to get married, would somebody come see you then? Or my question is, does someone have to have sex before they come see you? I know you're a sex therapist, but
no, absolutely not.
Okay.
No, because I mean, still then I have that background. So I am classically trained. Like, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I'm classically trained as a social worker, and I have LCSW. So that means that I can do regular therapy as well. So a lot of times I do see people do come in with, depression, anxiety, those kind of things. And then it triggers into having bad relationships. So on the flip side of that, I do see people who are trying to navigate new relationships or trying to navigate, okay, how do I explore my sexuality in regards to my not necessarily Christianity, but my religion. And I actually see couples that still struggle, who are very devout, who still struggle with sex even after marriage, because it's still, you can't just turn that switch off.
Right.
We've talked about that on the podcast too.
I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, you did, because it's kind of like I'm asking for myself, but not really for myself. If that's
asking for a friend,
asking for a friend, but not really for myself. So I haven't had sex, and I hope to wait until marriage. Not 100% sold, but I hope to wait until marriage, right? And so I do hear a lot of stories that like people get married, they wait until marriage, they get married, and then like you said, they can't turn off the fact that they've been waiting for so long, or now it's okay to have sex, and now I'm supposed to do all of these things. I want to ask for the people that still,
it's definitely a struggle for a lot of people. So I think that if that was the case for somebody, I would say, maybe start that process. You're in a relationship, you think things are getting serious and it might get to marriage. Let's start kind of breaking down some of that giving yourself permission to navigate this new world
Mm.
sexually and what that might look like.
I was just gonna ask you, what does that look like, or might look like?
So it might look like, okay, what am I okay with trying? Not necessarily just jumping in and have everything at my disposal. So
Mhm.
where are my limits? Where am I comfortable with? Or what do I just know that I don't want to explore right now?
Mm.
And that could be as simple as, okay, I want to do some deep kissing, or if having sex like has to be off. It just depends on where you are and where your comfort level lie.
Okay, so I think this is someone asked me to ask this question, so I think it's a good time to ask it. Um, so this can be in any relationship. What are some natural ways to increase your sex drive? I think it's a broad question.
Some people
Mm.
use it is a broad question. Some people like to consult food because there are certain foods that are actually that are aphrodisiacs. I always stumble with that word. That includes maybe chocolate and some fruits that kind of get those organs flowing. But a lot of times it depends on, are my other needs being met? Like
Right.
am I in an emotionally stable place? Do
Hmm.
I feel secure with this person? How else do we relate besides the bedroom? That's gonna increase, how you feel about them sexually. So usually it's just how we vibing outside the bedroom that's gonna dictate how we get down in the bedroom
And
or
I think,
wherever.
yeah, for a lot of women, it's mental first. Like the stimulation
Hmm.
happens mentally and then your body follows it. So that and eat some oysters, right? Eat some chocolate dipped
That's what I
strawberries.
hear.
I haven't, I don't know.
Yes.
I've had oysters before. I haven't noticed any difference, but people swear by them. So do
Yeah.
you, boo boo? All right. So
Hmm.
they were a couple. We come to you. Do you give us homework? Like, I know there's like the special yoga where you're touching and you're breathing and all that stuff. Like, do you tell us to go home and have sex? Like, what do you, depending on the issue, of course, I know that there's different levels of concerns that can be going on in the relationship. But for the average person, what would you say you would first tell them to do if they're experiencing some issues in the bedroom?
Okay. Usually it's either there's two methods I usually go. Usually it's either a communication breakdown, and so we do communication exercises. Okay, when you go home, you're going to work on talking about XYZ with your partner, or you're going to work on doing affirmations with your partner every day. Or if it truly is intimacy, sexual disconnect, then a lot of times I'll tell them to take sex off the table.
Hmm.
Like,
Take it
don't
off
have
the table
sex.
at
Focus
all.
on the other. Yeah, focus on the other aspects of your life that are intimate. Like, what do you like to do besides sex? Do you like holding hands with your partner? Do you like kissing them? Do you like being cuddled up on the couch watching TV? What do you like to do that's not
Mm,
necessarily sex driven? If you have sex, that's okay, but I don't want that to be the pressure. I don't want you to feel pressure to have sex. Just enjoy being with your partner,
mm, that's
to
good.
try to get that spark back or to try to rebuild that intimacy.
That's good. Think about that. um, so I know Ebony just asked a question. One of our listeners also asked another question. I'm going to try to paraphrase it as best I can. But you're in a relationship with somebody and they're not satisfying you sexually. What's the best way to tell them that doesn't seem as though you're like downing them, or you don't want to make them feel bad as though they're not doing a good job at all? They're just not
Mhm.
doing exactly what you like. So how do you suggest you let them know?
So the number one thing to do is don't have the conversation when either one of you are have an attitude or in a heated moment.
Mm,
You want to have a conversation when y'all both are in a good mood, chilling, relaxing. So maybe if y'all are just watching TV or having a casual conversation, that person can say, I want to have a conversation with you, but I don't want you to take offense to it. I just want to share what I got on my mind and what I'm concerned about. And then go into the conversation like that versus just, and don't be accusational either. Just go in very chill. This is what's been concerning me. This is has been bothering me. I just have a discussion about it.
Would you recommend during the act maybe saying, let's try it this way, or let's do something a little different right here. Like saying it in that moment versus waiting until later.
I think it depends on your partner and how well you know them and how they're going to react to it. If it's something that's like minor change that may not really necessarily make a difference to them, but will to you, just go ahead and do it. Guide their hand somewhere or just over or whatever you want to do and lead them. If it's something like that, that's an easy fix. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
It's an
But if
easy
it's something
fix, but it's
dramatic,
yeah.
well, just if it's what?
If it's something dramatic, you're like, don't try to.
Like, you biting me, stop.
Yeah.
Like, I'm crazy.
So I was watching this.
And I think it depends on.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think it depends on too, if that person that you're having sex with, is it a true partner or is it just somebody you're hooking up with, and what your dynamics look like outside the bedroom can also dictate how you handle that.
Oh, that makes
True,
sense.
that's true. Yeah.
So wait a minute. So if they're not like, you're not in a relationship with this person, do you really tell them? I mean, unless you want to, like, let's say you have this person on the side and you want to kind of keep them around for fun. I guess you at that point will tell them like, hey, X, Y, and Z isn't working, or do you just say, let me just find somebody else?
I would hope you don't just go find somebody.
I mean, it's a side.
Well, it all depends. It all depends. If you are invested in that partner and whatever that looks like for you, if you are invested in that partner and you do want them to stick around, but it's not nothing that's super serious, just go ahead and kind of make those changes, and you can make it sexy. So whatever you're doing, if you need like a quick change, just make it look good, and usually they won't just
no
just
diagram.
go with it.
You said no diagram?
Not necessarily. No flow chart. Just go with it.
I know, as a therapist, you can't really, give out information on patients, of course. But is there like a story?
Oh, I want to know the worst one
that you heard that may be interesting or funny or something like that you can share with us? Because they've got those shows like Sex Took Me to the ER or something like that. I think it's on TLC. People do a whole kind of crazy stuff and end up in the ER. But I'm just wondering, have you heard anything that kind of shocked you? Because you hear a lot, I'm sure, that was funny or something.
I'm trying to think of anything that I really consider to be funny or shocking. Not anything too off the wall. And the things that I have seen that are off the wall are actually too specific for me to share, if that makes sense. So like it happens. So like if somebody were listening, be like, yeah, she's talking about me for sure. I know that. So unfortunately, I would like to share, but like the spectrum is so wide. It's like, okay, we know for sure that's it.
Right.
But I will say things, if you're not using the right tool or the right toys, things can get stuck in places, is all I'm going to say. And that is for sure.
Okay.
No.
So, random question. What if you had someone that was like interested in BDSM and then someone who was interested in, I don't know, I'm trying to make something up, or not interested in it? Would you have advice for the person not interested to kind of like try something out? Or would you say, okay, well, this is, not compatible?
Are you talking about a couple who are one might be interested and one is not?
Yes.
Okay. So for the person who is not interested or maybe not familiar with it, what I would do is collectively we would decide, is it something that you are open to exploring at all? And then we would go into, okay, well, what are some things that you might be willing to try within this realm? And what some things that are your hard limits, absolutely not, and see if they can come to some kind of compromise. Because when we think about BDSM and kinky, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, because when we think about BDSM and kinky stuff, it really is so vast. Like there's so many things, so many caveats in BDSM. Like even as far as being spanked, somebody could consider that spank. Somebody consider that kinky or in the community. So it just depends on where we at, what we're open to, and how we explore it. But if that person is like absolutely not, then I would say okay, then maybe it may not work if you don't want to truly give up that lifestyle.
It brings me to this podcast that I was looking at, and they were talking about coming up with like a sheet or like this is a green or a go for me. This is a yellow, like, proceed with caution. This is absolutely hard stop. And so they came up with a list. As a married couple came up with a list of things that they were willing to try or not try. And then every year or every 6 months or so often, they reevaluate the list and say, okay, well, these things are still the same. These things have changed on the list.
Yeah, it's like that.
I think that's a good place to start. But since she brought up a married couple, I know that you are still a newlywed.
Oh, congratulations.
I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know that is an exciting time. I mean, I don't know. I ain't been there, but I'm sure it's an exciting time in your life. So what does your husband think about your career field?
I don't think he thinks anything about it.
Oh, really? He's just like,
So
oh,
I don't think so because well, me and him have been off and on for forever and a day. So he knew this coming into it, what I was doing, what my career was looking like, and what it had the ability to turn into. So for the most part, he hasn't said anything negative about it. He's always been very supportive. Like he really is my cheerleader on this. He's always like, you got this. I'm glad you're doing what you want to do and pursuing your dreams. So he's never said anything. At the very most, he might be curious about what happens. And of course, I can't share stories. So, but other than that, he doesn't think anything negative or anything like question about it. He's all for it. And most of my family too, to be honest, all of my family is just like, oh yeah, she's a sex therapist. That's and my grandparents, well, that's what she want to do. So it's crazy. Like I have so much support around it, and you wouldn't think that in the Black community with sexuality still being so taboo, but my family is really gung ho about it, very open and asking questions.
That's really good because sex in general, yes, is taboo across the board. But you're doing your thing. And what made you decide to actually go into the sex therapy side instead of just remaining as a normal, like everyday therapist?
So a couple things happened in my life that got me set on this path. So I don't know if you remember or not, but we're about the same. We're about in the same age range. So when we were younger, there was a TV show called Talk Sex with Sue, with the old lady with the white hair.
I don't remember that.
You never heard that show?
No, I do remember one sex
Man,
therapist.
I think she
that
was
used to be
on.
popular, though. Dang it, what was her
It's
name?
called Talk Sex with Sue. I'm gonna look it up while you talk.
And she used to come on TV like way late at night, like 10, 11 o'clock. And this was like in maybe middle school, high school when she was coming on. And she was just talking about sex, and people would call in with their questions, and she would answer the questions, and she would review sex toys. And I was like, oh, if she can do that, I can do that.
I remember now as I'm looking at her. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember her. You sneak and watch that show.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Yes, I remember now. Okay.
And I said, yes, I could definitely I could do that. But I took that away in my pocket. And then also, unfortunately, I was sexually assaulted in college. And I probably could have benefited from a sex therapist at that point to help me sort out some things as well. And so those two things combined made me think that, okay, this is something I really want to pursue. And that was my thought about junior year in college, but it didn't happen right away. I kind of took it away again, and I chose a different career path. But after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Might as well. And so that's how I ended up getting my MSW, because you have to have some kind of clinical degree anyway to go into the program to kind of support that certification process. So I just chose social work, and that's how I got into it. So.
See, I knew Dr. Ruth. I had to look her up, but that's who
They kind of look alike. They're kind of similar.
Mm. So do you see yourself one day like having a show like that and teaching people about their bodies and about sex toys and all that, or are you good where you're at with the therapy side?
I think if it evolved to that, that'd be very cool. I would be for it. But if it doesn't, I think that I could be cool where I am as well. Like I could be content with what I do now.
Mm.
So
That's
maybe like down the road, if somebody were to approach me and say, "We have this TV show for you. We want you to do this," and I would do it in a heartbeat. But if not, it's okay.
okay. Okay. All avenues are open for travel. Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I know that we're in a good rhythm, but as you said, there was two things that brought you to being in to going into this career field. One being the show, and then the second, what happened in college, which I hate to hear that. It actually happens a lot of the time, and a lot of people don't speak on it. So I commend you for even
Hmm.
saying that on the show right now. Um, and I was wondering, do you see people who come to you specifically for that same reason, that they may have been assaulted by a boyfriend or a friend or someone close to them, and then they come to you? And if so, do you see them as a regular patient, or do you send them to a specialist in that area?
What do you mean by specialist in that area?
I don't know. Is there like a specialist when it comes to like traumatic sexual, like rape and things of that nature? If there's like, if that's something that you dig into personally with them, or if you send them to another colleague or someone that you know specializes more in that area.
Oh, because I was gonna say I am the specialist, but you. So it's rare that I see them fresh off the scene, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Usually, if there is some sexual assault or if there is some kind of sexual thing going on, some traumatic sexual experience, that's usually disclosed to me after there's something else going on. So like a patient might come to me because they're having problems, maybe having sex with a new partner, and it might come up that there was some sexual trauma from back in the day that they hadn't worked through.
Mm,
But and then we go through it, we go through the process that way. But
mm,
it's rare, but it happens, but it doesn't happen a lot, which is unfortunately because I do think a lot of people are so ashamed about it that they're not going to talk about it.
right. There's definitely a shame of, oh, I could have done this differently, or I shouldn't have been there, or I may
Mhm.
have led him on, or he was my
Mhm.
boyfriend and I kissed him. So really
Mhm.
that kind of told him yes, so and
Mhm.
unfortunately the guys kind of think it's okay. And it could be women too that do it. I'm sure women also could be the aggressor and the assaulter. But there
Sometimes
just needs to
yes.
be more education on that level, even starting as young as junior high, because these kids are out here in these streets like knocking each other down, like 13-year-olds pregnant. I didn't even think about sex then. Like, didn't even think about it.
Mhm. It's
Like,
happening.
so gotta have
Back in the
kids,
day
yo.
too. Yeah.
Huh?
I said it was happening back in the day, my age too, back in
It
school.
was.
Were they? Because I ain't none my friends wasn't doing it. We lame.
People that I know in school and they popped up pregnant and you were like, how is that possible?
So
How that happened?
the first person
Yeah.
I know that got pregnant was my friend Julie. She got pregnant our freshman year, the very first time she had sex. I was like, girl, what in the
Mhm.
world? And we still did, we didn't know really what it was, but she didn't finish. I'll say that because it was a lot. But before that, I mean, the kids were humping each other, but they weren't doing it that I know of. I don't know.
It was a lot of sex talk back in school. I don't know if people were doing it or just talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a lot.
Do
I
you
feel the
see?
same way. Like we didn't know if they were having it or not, but they were talking about it.
Mm-hmm. But now they having it for sure.
That's for sure. But yeah, now they're getting caught at school doing it. So
That is so crazy.
that's a whole different caveat. I a long time, so before I got into sex therapy, I actually was a middle school teacher. So
Mm.
So
so
you're like
I've
the
seen some things,
carpet.
I heard some things.
Mm-hmm.
So I've actually had some stuff happen in my classroom too. So I mean, it's just, it happens, and it's like, so
What did you
what'd you say?
What did you teach?
I taught.
Definitely not sex therapy.
I know.
Which probably should
Yeah,
be a
I
thing
taught
in
Spanish
school, to
for
be
two
honest.
years, and then I went back into school. What'd you say?
I was saying it probably should be a thing, to be honest. Maybe not in middle school,
I,
but
I think in middle school,
really?
definitely. Because they teach
so
you
I
puberty in middle
definitely think
school.
that it should be in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should.
Maybe
I
even
actually think the
elementary, maybe?
conversations about sex and sexuality should, yeah, should start like little kids, even as far as like what's appropriate touch and what's inappropriate touch, and then just develop into what it is as they get older.
Because
Mm.
sometimes parents don't
But I
have
think definitely by middle school, kids
Mhm.
should know.
Yeah, because sometimes parents don't have the tools to, teach their kids these things. They just kind of like, oh, hopefully the teacher says something. Because I don't, I'm not able to have
Hmm.
that conversation. So that'll be interesting to see going forward if schools are progressive enough to have sex therapists in schools, you know. That's
And
Because a
even
lot
if
of,
they don't have sex therapists in schools, I think that even from like a nursing standpoint,
mm-hmm.
mhm.
they can lead that conversation, because a lot of it's just education.
Right, right. Mm. These kids.
Maybe have like some sort of like some hybrid between a counselor and the nurse, like an educator come in, like you said, educator, maybe
Hmm.
be the title and be like
Hmm.
a hybrid between the two. But then funding and
And
stuff.
so there, I have a lot of friends who are actually sexuality educators versus therapists, and then that's what they do, is they consult with schools or they consult with corporations about how to have these conversations, even at like the corporate level when we talk about like sexual harassment and HR stuff. So there's people in my field that do strictly educating, so they're out there.
Oh,
Okay,
and so for
okay.
those, do they still need to get like a MSW or anything like that?
No, they don't.
Okay.
Um, People who tend to choose the more of the education route. So when I went to school, I got my second master's, and that's how I got my sex therapy certification. And there was two tracks. So one track was for sex therapists, and the other track was for sex educators. And they didn't need any kind of like degree, but before that, they could just go into it, as a master's program to teach sex education.
Hmm.
That's
Interesting.
interesting.
Do you ever go into schools in um pre-COVID and have discussions with um young adults or college age, anything like that, that's just open forum, or you just work with patients?
I do. No, I do. Usually, and surprisingly, since COVID, like I said before, like you mentioned in my presentation Friday, it was actually sponsored by UNC Charlotte.
Hmm.
So usually they have me come out once a year to have these conversations. And I've been at Fayetteville State, I've been at Central, I've been at various schools having these conversations. So yes, I do. I do go to colleges and we talk and we have presentations. So I do that.
I went to a Christian college, so they probably wouldn't let you at my college, but they probably should have.
Maybe not.
What I will say that I love about it is that you're, like we said, you're doing something that some people see as very taboo. A lot of people are uncomfortable with just the word sex. Like they get like a little embarrassed, even though we all will
Hmm.
do it or want to do it or have done it. Need to do it if you want babies type
Came
deal.
from it.
Exactly. We all came from it, and um but you're doing it as a Black woman, and I love that. I love that. It just seems, I just feel the power in it. I don't know if a lot of sex therapists are women or men, I have no idea, but for me, like, I could see myself being very comfortable with you because you look like me. And if you were to
Mhm.
come to my college and say something to
Hmm.
me, and if something happened to me, or back in the day or whatever, I can see myself opening up to you more because you me like head wrap, you know what I'm saying, lips popping, like we're each other, like we're sisters. So I do love
Right.
that about you. And I'm just happy that you picked a field that people can really
Aw.
benefit from. You know what I'm saying? Like it's something that's needed.
I think especially like
And
Ciera said
that's
earlier.
another reason why.
Sorry, I feel like Zoom has a little lag.
Yeah, it does.
So I
It
was
does.
say that Ciera had said earlier in the conversation about how we in the Black community, sex is so like nobody wants to talk about sex. If you talk to a friend and you're like, did your parents talk to you about sex? Probably not. You just kind of had to figure it out or learn from a friend of a friend or
Or TV.
something. Like I don't know what it's going to take in the Black community. I mean, I think with the new age, new generation, I think it's going to be a little bit better because we are learners and we are trying to do better
Mhm.
as people. So I hope that some of the things we don't carry down to, you know, the next generation.
Yeah. And I do agree. I think that when we have kids, or definitely our kids, I think we'll have the idea that we need to be a lot more open and honest
Right.
to perpetuate, even just to normalize that it's a human function at the very base level.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's going to be so secretive and so taboo, we at least need to know how to keep ourselves safe and protected if something were to happen
Right.
at the very basic level.
What do you think is so secretive and taboo? I mean, I think from my perspective, it's because Black women put it more on the girls and say like you can get pregnant, like they don't want to teach their girls to like keep themselves safe, but they tell the boys, you know, make sure you strap it up because you don't want to get um what's the word I'm looking for.
Locked down for 18 years.
Yes, but they don't do it the same. They just tell girls like don't get pregnant.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just the residuals of religion,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
and just the idea that women are supposed to be chaste forever. I think that's a lot of it. I would like to say that there's some residuals from slavery as well, but I think that's a conversation for a different day. But for the bigger picture, I think religion has a big part to do with it, and this is stigma that you don't want this reputation, you don't
Mhm.
want to be known as XYZ, you don't want to shame our family for any kind of reason, and I think that's where it comes from
Mm-hmm.
overall.
And I would say religion, but I also will say society too. I mean, if you look around, it's more of um, men. I don't won't call out a certain race. Want to keep um, women very. I don't want you in control. You know, I want you very like not seen, not heard, because I think that people don't give women enough credit about how sexual women can be. So if we have the power, think about how many men would be crazy out here, you know, if
I
we
think a
really
lot of it has to do too. When you think about it, we're not that really removed from being property, and not
Right.
even talking
mm,
about slavery, just talking about how society has viewed women forever as okay, we belong to our spouses, and before that, we belong to our fathers. So I think it is just like you said, it's that control. If she knew, if that she had this much power inside her, she really could just turn this world upside down. And I agree that it is a lot of it is a control thing.
I agree too.
I need that on a t-shirt.
Which part? It's a control
You need what
thing.
on a t-shirt?
I know it. Which part?
If something like if she knew she would turn this world upside down, like
Mm.
Ah,
Do you make t-shirts, Tia? Because you was like, wait a minute, let me
wait a
see.
minute, hold on, before you say it, let me
Can
right.
look.
you make us a t-shirt? Can you make us that t-shirt?
I might could make that happen. I might could make that happen. I do make t-shirts.
I thought So I was trying to read what yours says. I can't see the whole thing, but I was like, maybe she make
Oh,
t-shirts.
it says can we go deep? It's one of my tags on Instagram. Like if you do the hashtag can we go deep, you'll see a lot of my posts.
Can we go deep? I see what you did there. I like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, make us
Thank you.
um
I
did
did
you have
have a
another question from
I
a
did from
okay.
a listener. I forgot to ask this a while back. It probably don't flow with the conversation, but
It's okay.
it says if couples get disconnected, what are the top things they can do to reconnect sexually?
So that kind of goes along in the earlier conversation when I said take sex off the table and
Mhm.
don't let that be the focal point, and kind of back up and work on other intimate things and have those deep conversations about, how can we get back to us? Let's reminisce on when we were really good and what we were doing around that time that made it really good. So just kind
Mm.
of backtracking and focusing on other intimate ideas or intimate things that you might want to explore in the relationship to make it
Does it
stronger,
sound
I would
different for
suggest.
a new relationship than an older one, or would it be the same advice? What do you mean? So if it's a newer relationship, let's say 1 to 3 months, would you have the same advice for
Hmm.
someone in that period of time versus someone that's been a year, 2 years in?
I would, but to an extent, if it's 1 to 2 months and there's a disconnect sexually, maybe it was too early to have sex, or maybe
Mm.
we didn't have enough conversations about sex, and maybe that's probably where I would go to. Okay, let's go back and see what our expectations are and what they look like.
Okay.
Yep.
So, if you could do anything in your career and you knew you would succeed, what would it be?
I would be a sex therapist to the stars.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Ready for those conversations.
Absolutely, I'm here. I'm nosy. Let's just say that I'm nosy. I want to know, and how can I make it better for you?
I hear Bow Wow's supposed to be doing a CD or album or whatever that's talking about
Wow.
all his women that he's been with. So I'm like, yo, I don't know about
See, now
that.
that's toxic. There we
That's
go. Toxic.
down. I don't know about that. That don't sound like just don't drop any names. I would just hope he doesn't drop a name.
Knowing him, he would.
He trying to stay on top. But yeah, I'm sure there's the stars. That's
That's,
yeah.
hey, you gonna hear a lot of stories.
Would you
Like,
leave
what's the
Mm-hmm.
girl, the lady, sorry, the woman who had the book out a long time ago?
Superhead?
Yes, yes,
Corinne
yes.
Steffens, is that what
Yeah.
it is? I
Mm-hmm.
read her book.
Oh, I did too. So
I did too.
Had to, right? So what do you think about erotic
Absolutely.
what do you think about erotic
literature.
novels? Yeah. Do you recommend them for people to read, or you just don't ever bring them up? Because they do get stuff going, you know what I'm saying?
I personally like erotic novels,
Uh-huh.
so I wouldn't discredit it. I would say, oh, yeah, if that is what you like, or if that's what you want to explore, please go for it. I'm all about it.
Could it
What's
help a
your what's your
couple?
hmm?
Could it help a couple, like if they're reading erotic novel together? That
I,
or that
I think so.
that wouldn't be any recommendation. Like, hey, how about y'all go home and just read this book right here?
I don't have a book that I would specifically say, hey, go read, but I would ask them, what do they like? What kind of media, if they do they like to get aroused from, whether that be
Oh, because movies.
erotic novels or just traditionally porn, like whatever, or magazines. I would
Here I am
recommend
talking
it,
about
yeah.
movies, and I just skipped right over porn. I'm like, oh, they can watch movies.
Some of these movies be like porn and they're not
That's
even
real.
porn, right? Some of these
Uh-huh.
TV shows, you'd be like, whoa,
Okay.
that's real graphic.
What
Have you
authors do
seen
you
Bridgerton?
recommend?
No.
What author do you recommend? Like, I mean, the only person that comes to mind right now is Zane. But do you have any authors that you would recommend for erotica?
Not offhand, I don't. I and this I guess it just goes to me and my personal struggles. That I used to be such an avid reader when I was younger, and now I don't, which is a
Mm.
shame. But I was reading Zane too back in the day, and that's just I still got Zane's on my bookshelf right now. That I'm just like, okay, go to.
I never got into Zane, but Eric Jerome Dickey was he knew
Yes.
how to write to make stuff
Yeah.
like, I'm like, yo, I can see that happening.
Hmm.
Oh, but it wouldn't
And
be classified as erotica, I don't think.
no, no, I
But
don't.
he
Maybe
knew
mild, maybe mildly.
he knew how to write. So God rest his soul. EJD.
And because a lot of it too was play on words. It just gets
Mhm.
you thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
Same.
what about I have to ask about this. 50 Shades of Grey. What do you think about I don't know if you read the books or if you've seen the movie. What do you think about it?
I think so. I think I may have watched the first. I may have watched the first movie or maybe try to get into the book, and I really couldn't get into it. It really was popular around the time I was in sex therapy school.
Mhm.
So a lot of people were talking about it and referencing. I think it's a good way to maybe start the conversation about BDSM. I don't think it was actually a true model of what it might look like, but I think it
Mm.
at least serve the purpose of getting the world talking about BDSM and making kinky stuff more normal.
I don't think it would be I mean, I read a lot of books. I don't think it would be a book for me that I would it's I feel like she was wordy, but a lot of it was like very repetitive. Like she said the same things over and over. So, I mean, if you're not a reader, I would say read the book, but um eh, it's very mm, you know. I
Okay.
go to Zane
That
before.
was pretty the consensus too. Was that
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I read the books, have them just for the sake of reading. I watched the movies just for the sake because I read the
mhm,
book. I got to watch the movie. But like I said, it's
mhm.
not. She didn't say anything mind blowing or anything that was different.
I didn't
Mm.
think so. From what I heard, I didn't think it was too out there.
No, it was everything. Again, the book was very repetitive. But I think the part that made it great was just kind of like imagining meeting this person out of the blue that has a lot of money. It seemed that whole storyline made it watchable.
Mm.
There's actually a movie that's a lot better than Fifty Shades of Grey. It's an older movie. It's called The Secretary. And I didn't learn about this movie until I was in sex therapy school myself. And I think that shows a better depiction of BDSM on that level. So if
Mm.
anybody has access to it, I would recommend that movie.
Check Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix has a lot.
Check Prime. Because you said it's older.
Yeah, I bet you it's on Prime. This is an older
Mm.
movie, so I'm pretty sure it probably is on Prime.
Yeah. The
If
secretary. Okay.
if you could and I'm
Hmm.
if you could recommend like a any book, or do you have certain books that you recommend to your clients, or if you um that's I'll start with that question.
So I don't have a lot of books that I recommend, and I should do better about that because I guess when we're talking about like erotica, I probably would just reference Zane. But if we're talking about like self-help books,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot that I go by because
Mm.
usually what I get to my patients is I have workbooks that I might reference from and I might give them direct homework from that workbook. And if that includes some reading, then it does. So that's usually my model is giving instructions based on where I feel they are and what I have to reference on my own toolkit.
I guess that makes sense. And then they're there for sex therapy anyway. I mean, they probably don't want to read.
Right.
That's the last thing you're trying to do.
Right. So, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you wanted to kind of let the listeners know? Something that's on your heart that you just want to, hey, let me just go ahead and tell these people this. Because I know we've been firing these
Something on
questions
my
at you.
heart.
Like, I
We
didn't know.
have. And it's been really good conversation though, for sure. not necessarily anything that's on my heart, but I do just want to normalize therapy in general. Not even necessarily sex therapy, but just mental health counseling. Just I think it's for everybody. There's nothing wrong with seeing a therapist for whatever reason. I think it's very normal. It's healthy. If you would go to the doctor for a checkup, why not go to get your mental health checkup checked up as well?
Right.
That's my little PSA
Your
for
little
today
plug.
is mental health matters. Yes. And I do regular therapy as well. So again, if you're interested, those listening and you're in North Carolina, I definitely can hook you up.
Tell them the name of your business again. Go ahead and plug yourself,
My
sister.
website is I know. I'm so bad at that. I am. I need to do better. But my website is BeTheChange HKY.com. And that's where you'll find my information. I have a book there as well. Again, if you're in North Carolina, I can see you. I do teletherapy and I do take major insurances too. A lot
Oh,
of
let
people
me
don't think
know.
about sex therapy and insurance, but I do take insurance.
Okay. And so do I have to be in North Carolina? Can they be like, since you're doing teletherapy, can they be in a different state and still go through you?
No, unfortunately, because again, like I said before, to do what I do, you have to have a license to practice, and my license is based out of North Carolina.
Hmm.
There are, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of sex therapists. The field is growing. The field is growing, especially up and down the coast and on the West Coast. There's lots of schools popping up too that do the work that are able to make sex therapists. So we're growing.
Hmm.
So for me, no, but I do have connects all over
Okay.
if need be.
Yeah, because we got listeners everywhere. So you can, if you are listening and you want to get us, find a sex therapist, please feel free to DM us at the Real Play Podcast, and we can connect you with Tia, or you can send a message directly to her. Her Instagram handle is T the sex therapist without the E. So either way, we can get you hooked up with a sex therapist or even a regular therapist who may every now and then talk about sex.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yep.
so yeah,
Exactly. See.
I'm learning.
Exactly. Mhm.
We'll definitely have to get you to come back because I'm pretty sure people will have lots of questions. I'm pretty sure they'll be like, why didn't you ask this? Or you should have said this. But
Right.
yeah, so we'll definitely have to have you come back.
I'm definitely open to. I love it. I'll be back.
Yes, and we can talk about toxic relationships. We can talk about gaslighting. Like we can talk about a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and I know you know. So,
Yep. I do.
The only thing I wanted was the worst thing that you heard in, but you said it was too specific. So dang it.
It was like it was like oh my gosh, it really was. But
That
I
minute
mean,
was real
and that's
good.
the
Like I
thing
got that one
too.
wrong too, but
I will say, well, I can share this. How about this? When I was in sex therapy school, um, so the point of going to sex therapy school is to learn how to do the work and how to work on patients with sexual trauma and how to explore kinkiness. And one of the classes was um, the whole class was just basically we watched porn for a majority of the class, and then we would see like live demonstrations on things. So the
okay.
most
Wait,
interesting
wait,
thing that
wait.
I saw
Hold on.
was
Go back. What you mean? You were just gonna slide through there. We saw live demonstration. What you mean? Like somebody was in your class having sex?
so not having sex first like live, but I did see when you think about BDSM, you think about people getting tied up and spanked and kind of those things. So we did see live demonstrations on that, and I thought that was the
Oh,
most eye-opening thing
Oh,
for
I
me is
thought
when
you
I
were saying that
saw
people were actually live having sex in
me
your
too. I
class.
was like, wait.
no, no, no. We watched porn in the
Mhm.
classroom, but then we saw like live demonstrations on like scenes.
Okay.
So people who practice in the BDSM doing the tying up in the handcuffs and the using floggers. So that was the most point. That was like the biggest eye opener to me to see it live in that aspect.
Right.
So
I
they
think
did
that was
everything
probably the
else
most
but
most shocking things that I've. Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just glazed over that real quick. I was like, hold on, let's reverse. I
I
mean, but
think but you know what? I think that if we did see people having sex in class, like live sex, I don't think it would have been that shocking. I think seeing the demonstrations and people's booties out getting spanked and that kind of stuff, I think that was more impactful for me than to see sex.
mm,
And this is like hard spanking, like
Like screaming out sex words, or even if there was one when the person was gagged where he couldn't speak, so he was using like hand signs to say,
that's enough.
I'm good. Those kind of things to me, like I said, that was more like, oh shoot, this is for real,
mm.
than seeing people having sex on a screen.
Wow. Both of them would have
But the
shocked me.
whole
I'd have been
point of
like,
that was so. Yeah, and that's the whole point though, is so you can get kind of numb to it.
I about to
So if it
say.
happens, like if you somebody talk about it on your couch, you're
You're not
not
like,
making expressions or faces, you're just like, oh,
So that makes
okay.
me think. So I do think that we're kind of society in general is kind of hypersexual, but at the same time, it's like, why are we so desensitized to such a taboo thing? Um, like some people just are like, oh, well, they just doing it, it's whatever, or oh, it's on, I'm just gonna watch it. Like they don't realize the impact of what exactly sex is and what it's for. It's kind of crazy at the same time.
It's like a 22. It's so taboo that you want to see it, but then when you see it so much, you're like, oh, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I'll be like this
it's
though,
a
you
really
know.
random question that I probably should not ask on the podcast. I probably should just not ask this at all. But has there ever been like a time where somebody would come in the office and tell you something, and then you're like, let me go try that?
Never. Actually, no.
I don't know why that
But
bothers
that's funny.
me.
But I'm laughing because it's a good question. I'm laughing because I can see somebody thinking that, but no,
Mm,
because like I said, I've seen so much in school and heard so much and seen, even like on a personal level. I'm just like, okay. There hasn't been too many things that have made me drop my mouth in a session. I'll say that.
Because I just
mm,
assume when people come into sex therapy, most of it is like normal stuff, like stuff that, well, maybe not. I don't know. Stuff that's not as shocking, like it's like normal relationship stuff. And
mm-hmm.
then I feel like then you get the one-off things that you're like, oh, okay, well, this is fun today. Got a little mix up.
No, but I will say I've had people that come in and try to troll the situation. Like I've had people that would try to say the most off the wall stuff to see if you would get a reaction,
Interesting.
Mm.
which I think is crazy. Like you gonna pay me this money to try to see if
Just
you can make me be shocked, but really, I'm just
that's
gonna
what you
cash your
do,
check and tell you to
right?
come back in 2 weeks.
Get your money, honey. Like, all right,
Okay.
right. So I think I am tapped out as far as questions right now. I think I fired you all up with all the ones
Okay.
that I have. And Ebony, you don't have any more for any listeners either?
No,
No.
no.
Okay. Well, yeah, like we said, we thank you so much for being here, for being candid and open,
Yes.
to talk about something that we have not really talked about on this podcast, which is another reason why I think, like Ebony said,
Hmm.
we're going to get people hitting us up like, hey, why didn't you say this? Or we had this question. Or so we'll probably get a lot of feedback on this episode. So we'll definitely stay in contact with
Yeah.
you, get you to come on back when you have time.
Please
'Cause you
do. Yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay, okay. And I know you plugged it twice, but we always give everybody a plug one last time before we end. So tell them how to reach you, whether they have a question they want to just DM you about, or they want to come for your services.
So follow me on IG for one, T the sex therapist, no E in sex. Or you can come to my website. It's bethechangehky.com.
Yes, be the change. and you're gonna go deep.
Mhm.
Right. So,
With consent.
That's important.
honey. Yes, that is always needed, and a requirement.
Mhm.
But we do want to thank all the listeners for checking in with us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode, that you learned something, that something sparked your interest. You may even say, hey, you know what? I might want to be a sex therapist now that I know what they do.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
just hit us up in our DMs. We are at the Real Play Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and
Skip Twitter.
and or the Real Play Podcast at gmail.com. Send us a voice note. Let us know what you thought about this episode. And if you have any questions, we are here for y'all. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. This is Ciera.
This is Ebony, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching.
All right.
All right,
Bye.
bye.